Hello, good evening, everybody. Welcome to our Tech Tuesday. I know a lot of people are in the dark, so there are a few people that aren't able to join us tonight. But we are continuing the subject that I started last week, which is the subject of sports nutrition. And as we discovered last week, sports nutrition is quite complex because one size does not fit everybody. And what works for one doesn't necessarily work for the other. And some sports require more nutrition and more nutrients, specific nutrients, than others do, and others require less. So because every human being is uniquely made, we have to look at every human being in a unique fashion and see what works best for them. And I know whenever I consult with somebody, just to take them on, basically to guide them, I've got a little questionnaire that was compiled by Dr. Jim McAfee, who's a clinical nutritionist. And I found it to be very, very helpful. So I send that to people and they complete it for me. And then it gives me a better idea of exactly what to suggest, what not to suggest. So please be aware that when you are advising people on things specifically like sports nutrition, there are a lot of factors that you've got to look at. And it's always actually a better idea to refer them to either a nutritionist, clinical nutritionist, or a dietitian who is more versed or better versed in actual sports nutrition, because it is quite a complex subject, as we saw last week, and I just scratched the surface last week. But not only is it a complex subject, but especially if the person is a professional, it can mean the end of their career if they take things that they shouldn't be taking. And it could be something as simple as a cough mixture or even a throat lozenge. So I'm going to share my screen and we're going to continue on from what we did last week. Where's my goodies? Okay, go. Okay, let me hide myself over here. Actually going to hide me quite a bit over here tonight. So tonight we're talking about eating for endurance. As with anything and everything with sports nutrition, diet is the base. If you don't have the correct diet, you can't always supplement correctly. So you need to have a good, balanced diet. And drinking energy drinks isn't it. So when we talk about eating for endurance, we're talking about these sports that last for many hours. Think Comrades Marathon, think Washi 100. Somebody was telling me today that their daughter's taking part in some in the next couple of months in a trail run that runs for 24 hours. I can't really imagine myself running for 24 hours, but there are people that do it. That is endurance. Even, sorry about that, even people who, like the Formula One race drivers and the motorcycle drivers, they are taking, those guys are undergoing extreme amounts of energy over about an hour at a time, and they need that endurance. So even at like a 10 or 20K run needs endurance because it's more than an hour. Endurance programs are defined as 1 to 3 hours per day of moderate to high intensity exercise. So even a rugby game is considered endurance because those guys go for 90 minutes at a time. Tennis players as well. High energy intake in the form of carbohydrates is essential in these cases. According to research, target carbohydrate consumption for endurance athletes ranges from 6 grams to 10 grams per kilogram of body weight per day. And if you think about rugby players, and obviously they are the forefront at the moment because of the World Cup, some of those guys are weighing in around about 120 to 140 kilos of virtually solid muscle. There's not a lot of fat in them. So 6 to 10 grams per kilo of body weight per day, you can get a good idea of the sort of diet that they have to consume on a daily basis. Fat is a secondary source of energy used during long duration training sessions. And again, these guys train for 6-7 hours a day, sometimes longer. I know some of the Olympic swimmers can train for upwards of 10 to 11 hours a day. Endurance athletes are more at risk for dehydration, especially in high humidity areas in summer. Replacing fluids and electrolytes lost through sweat are necessary for peak performance because they are pushing out a huge amount of fluid through the pores of the skin. And not only are they eating for endurance, but they also need to eat for strength. Resistance training programs are designed to gradually build the strength of skeletal muscle. And we're not talking bodybuilders over here, we're talking endurance like the rugby players. Strength training is high intensity work. It requires sufficient amounts pardon me, of all macronutrients for muscle development. Building muscle and gaining strength requires sufficient and consistent nutrition and fitness habits. And we're talking stress basically to the muscle. Essentially, for a muscle to grow, you've got to damage it and break it down because then it will build up. And that's where the strength comes from. If you don't do anything on a daily basis, if you take a bodybuilder, for instance, who is used to this intense workout and they stop training for whatever reason, maybe they're at the end of their career or they get injured, they stop training, that muscle very quickly disappears. If you've ever broken a leg or an arm and you get put into a plaster cast, you'll understand what I mean, because your cast goes on and 4 to 5 weeks later, you are literally rattling around inside that cast because you've lost all that condition of the muscle, meaning that it is broken down and you've now got to build it back up again. No matter what your goals are, both what you eat and your activity level can be adjusted to help achieve those milestones. So when working with a personal trainer or a health coach, they need to find out, what is your goal? Is your goal to run the Comrades Marathon and finish in 6 hours or in the top 5, for instance? Or are you quite happy to finish at 11 hours, 59 minutes? Because your nutrition is going to be different for those two categories. Is your goal to become the next Arnold Schwarzenegger? If so, your nutrition is going to be different to what I eat. I don't think I'm going to be competing for that title anytime soon. If your goal is just to stay fit, we change your diet accordingly. You need to lose weight. All those things need to get factored in accordingly, and they have to be adjusted to your specific goals. Building muscle, for instance, requires strategic shifts in both how you move your body and how you nourish it. I was listening to a podcast the other day, and this gentleman was talking about when he injured himself and he ruptured an Achilles tendon. And what had happened was he had been training for a marathon. So his training was around strength and endurance. And somebody, one of his friends, invited him to just a friendly one-on-one. I think there was a group of guys that were playing a little bit of basketball. Now, basketball, like netball, is a lot more stop-start. It's running short distances and jumping. So there's a lot more intensity needed in that muscle. You need a lot more flexibility in the muscle to be able to do that stop, start, and change direction and jump. And because his training had been for marathon, which was more strength and endurance, he was too tight for the basketball, and he snapped an Achilles, which obviously messed up his whole goal planning session and set him back something like 9 months in his training. So it really depends on what they are wanting to do. Protein intake is especially vital to increase and maintain lean body mass. Research indicates protein requirements can vary from 1.2 grams to 3.1 grams per kilogram of body weight per day. And then you have your eating for competition. So there's one thing doing training. There's another thing actually taking part. And I think we touched on this last week, where there's the pre-competition, the competition, and the recovery. And when you look at things like the rugby teams at the moment, where it's a business and it's a big business, and these guys are playing, they are all individual brands basically, and they're playing for money. So if they get injured in a game, they don't have the luxury of recovering for 4 to 5 weeks to get back to optimal, because their contract says they have to play next week. So they end up with all sorts of long-term injuries for the sake of the job, basically, and for the sake of their career. And that's why a professional athlete has a comparatively short career span. Except, of course, if you're a golfer, for instance, those guys can carry on for significantly longer. But a rugby player, a mountain biker, marathon athlete, all those guys have relatively short career spans. Preparing for a competitive sport will vary in sports nutrition requirements. For example, strength athletes strive to increase lean mass and body size for their sport. Endurance runners focus on reduced body weight or fat or peak body function during their event. And during that run, these guys lose anything up to 3 kilograms in weight. Athletic goals will determine the best sports nutrition strategy. Pre- and post-workout meal planning are unique for each athlete and essential for optimal performance. So it is good to have them work with a well-trained and specifically trained sports nutrition dietitian. So as we spoke earlier, hydration in sports performance is vital. Think of hydration as oil in an engine, because without it, that engine seizes. Without your proper hydration, not just having a sip of water every so often, but proper hydration, your muscles, which are essentially your engine, are going to seize. And some signs of dehydration, because your body's not going to flash up with a little red light saying, hey, you're dehydrated, you need to do something. So you've got to listen to yourself. And some of those signs are things like thirst, dry mouth, fatigue, muscle cramps, headaches, and nausea. And I know from myself, and I'm simply doing a little 5K run, when it comes to the hotter times of the year, we're talking November through February, if I don't hydrate correctly, I know I develop a headache later on, and I know I tend to want to cramp a few hours after my run. Fatigue, not so much. thirst, to a little extent, but not too bad. Dry mouth, I wouldn't really say so. Nausea, not often. So those are just some of the signs. Adequate hydration and electrolytes are essential for health and athletic performance. Pardon me. We all lose water throughout the day, but active adults and athletes lose additional body water and a significant amount of sodium sweating through intense workouts. If you've ever sat in a sauna, you'll understand what that means. Just sit in a car on a relatively warm summer's day with all the windows closed, and you'll understand, you'll get a small idea of what these people are enduring during their training. So it is vitally important that they hydrate very, very well. And I'll often say to patients, you need to drink more water because it helps with so many different things. And they all look at you and go, yes, I know, but I'm very bad at drinking water. Well, you actually need to make a plan. And drinking 1 glass of water a day isn't doing it. Drinking 3 cups of coffee a day isn't doing it. So you need to hydrate correctly. Dehydration is the process of losing body water, and fluid deficits greater than 2% of your body weight can compromise the athletic performance and cognitive function. So think of somebody who weighs 100 kilos and they lose 2 grams of body weight. Please correct me if my maths is wrong, but that's 2%. And they're going to be in trouble. Not a lot to lose, but they're going to be in trouble. Athletes are recommended to use fluid replacement strategies as part of their sports nutrition to maintain optimal body functioning. And notice they say fluid replacement, not just water. Water obviously is great, but sometimes you need those extra electrolytes. And that's where your energy drinks, or your, I shouldn't say energy drinks, but more your sports drinks come along. Think Energade, Gatorade, those sort of things. They are electrolyte drinks more than just fluid intake. Rehydration with water and sports drinks containing sodium are often consumed depending on the athlete and the sporting event. Lack of sufficient hydration for athletes may lead to the following issues. Hypohydration, which is otherwise known as dehydration. Hypovolemia, which is decreased plasma or blood volume, and that's where they'll basically faint. Hyponatremia, which is low blood sodium levels, and water intoxication. So there is such a thing as drinking too much water, because that then messes up or unbalances your electrolyte balance. And low sodium and low potassium, specifically potassium, I've seen can cause huge problems. Then we get to the things that we are interested in, that we work with, and that is supplementation. Sports supplements and foods are unregulated products marketed to enhance athletic performance. And we all know how this works, because it's unregulated, anybody can take something, pop it into a capsule or a tablet form, do a little bit of Google research and say, this is the answer to all of your problems. Take this, it'll give you super speed and super endurance, and you'll run Comrades in 3 hours and win it without a problem. Well, we know what happens there. Now, according to the Academy of Sports Medicine, the ethical use of sports supplements is a personal choice and remains controversial. As I mentioned last week, one has to be very careful about the ingredients of these supplements, because there are a whole mess of ingredients that professional athletes may not use. And professional athletes this is not just during the event, it's during the pre-event and the recovery. These guys can and are tested randomly at any time. So they can be in between seasons and they're out enjoying family time, or they're out with a bunch of friends, and they get a phone call and say, we need a urine sample within the next 12 hours. And if they've had anything that they shouldn't have had, they are going to get flagged, they are going to get caught, and because we're talking big money, they could lose a huge amount. So be careful when advising, and the athlete makes the final decision on whether or not they will accept the supplement. We can advise, we can tell them what's in the product, they make the final choice. There are limited supplements that are backed by clinical research. We know that pretty much all of our supplements in our range are backed by clinical research. However, sometimes people don't believe that research. And this is one of the reasons why professional athletes do like to use our range of products, because of the research and because they're made from food. There are no synthetics in there. So we know that they are generally considered safe. The Australian Institute of Sport has provided a general guide ranking sports performance supplements and foods according to the significance of scientific evidence. Sports food, such as sports drinks, bars and gels, electrolyte supplements, protein supplements, liquid meal supplements, and post-workout recovery foods and drinks. Then you get medical supplements, things like iron, calcium, vitamin D, multivitamin, mineral, and omega-3 fatty acids. So these assist with symptoms of lack of that nutrient or too much. So the food is simply, we know, a meal replacement. It's food. And bars and gels, those are all your sports food. But your medical supplements are your minerals. And vitamin D technically isn't a vitamin, it's a hormone. But that's for a whole nother discussion on another day. And if, I'm under correction on this one, but if you consume, I think it's more than 500 milligrams of vitamin D, it is considered a medicine. And then you get performance supplements such as creatine, caffeine, sodium bicarb, beta-alanine, and nitrate. Caffeine, think coffee, think sports drinks. Sodium bicarb, that's that stuff that sits in your cupboard. It's got a lot of different uses, but it's a performance supplement. Now, one of the articles that I picked up on doing my research was 5 evidence-backed supplements that may improve your fitness. They will never say, take this and it will boost your fitness, because you can't say that. We're not allowed to. But because of the research that's been done on these particular supplements that I will go through, we can say that they may improve your fitness. Supplements remain unregulated, and as a consumer, should be approached with buyer beware. Before handing over hard-earned cash for supplements, it's recommended to research the products, talk to your doctor, or dietitian, or nutritionist, and track your own progress. In other words, do your own research. Make an informed decision before purchasing a bunch of supplements thought to produce a fitness miracle. And we see this so often. You see these adverts, it says, if you take this, you will have this problem cured and that problem cured and the next problem cured. And they're making medical claims. And the frustrating part for me is that they seldom seem to get stopped from doing this. The first one is fish oil. Second one is BCAAs, which are branch chain amino acids. Next is vitamin D, then caffeine and creatine. I know my time is running a bit limited, so I'll start with one and then we'll finish off the rest next week. So the first one is fish oil, and I think this must be one of my more personal favorites because of its anti-inflammatory properties. Fatty fish contains docosahexaenoic acid, or DHA, eicosapentaenoic acid. Sorry, my pronunciation of this always falls over my tongue. Otherwise known as EPA. So we'll simply refer to it as DHA and EPA. And both of these are types of omega-3 fatty acids. And we know from SAB research that there are in fact 8 different types of omega-3 fatty acids, not just these 2, although these 2 are the most common ones. Omega-3 fats have already been linked to a decreased risk of heart disease, and now studies similar to one published in the Journal of the International Society of Sports Nutrition are seeing neuromuscular improvement for endurance athletes with fish oil supplementation. I know before I go for a run, I have a fish oil supplement, normally about half an hour, 40 minutes before my run. And it helps tremendously with my breathing, as well as just less stress on the muscle. Another study that was conducted on female elite soccer players and reported by the Journal of Sports Science and Medicine concluded that the study suggests that supplementation with DHA produced perceptual motor benefits in female elite athletes, and that DHA could be a beneficial supplement in sports where decision-making and reaction time efficiency are of importance. In other words, brain food. So I'm not going to get too much further into that. I will brush up on these things a little bit further from next week onwards. So I'm going to stop right here. You've got about 6 minutes left. I'm going to stop my sharing. Does anybody have any questions or comments on anything I've covered so far? If not, then I will pause and have an open mic.